The Ready Set Grow podcast is sponsored by Ag Expert, software designed for Canadian agriculture. Visit them today at agexpert.ca.
Welcome, everyone, to the Ready Set Grow podcast. My name is Joe Dales, and I'm one of the co-founders of RH Accelerator. And the podcast interviews interesting and innovative people in the agriculture and food sector. Today, as always, we've got a great special host. Diana Laturnis is here with us. So, hi, Di. How are you doing?
Hi. Good.
Good. And we're really excited today. We've got a terrific guest. Marty Seymour is with Farm Credit Canada and one of the more active speakers and experts and influencers in agriculture. So, Marty, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us your role at FCC. And for the people that don't know you, share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I love to open all my intros with, I have the coolest job in Canadian agriculture, hands down. So I work at FCC, as you said, in a very unique role called Industry Relations. And if you think about FCC as a Crown Corp in lending, we would have customers from BC to Newfoundland, from cows to canola to dairy to food processing. I spend my day listening to trends and themes in those sectors, trying to make some sense of it. And then along the way, making tons of connections in industry. So kind of become the ultimate networker in agriculture. And I consider myself kind of a generalist, but I paid a lot of attention in my role the last couple of years to things around automation, the ag tech side, how do we advance the industry? And then some emerging things we deal with at FCC, like, sustainability in agriculture, where's labor gaps in the industry. And so from a professional side, I still think the coolest job in the industry. The personal side, I'm actually a farm kid from Saskatchewan. My family, we grow cows and canola, and I'm actively involved in the farm. And I'm on a small scale because my paid job in town allows me a couple weeks of vacation every year to seed some crop and combine. But it keeps me grounded. And whenever I think I'm getting off track, I just go spend a week at the farm, and my dad reminds me how little I really know. I think it makes me better at this job that I have of paying attention to what's going on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Marty, you're immersed in the ag industry. Do you have some highlights of some of the things that have been happening over the last while?
Yeah, that's a good question. The team at FCC here, we spend a lot of time watching industry issues, and without a doubt, COVID has hijacked the agenda of every ag producer group, processors. It's been an all hands on deck situation. And so in this summer, things are slowed down. I used to spend all my time in airports and at buffet tables and conferences. And sitting at home, I started to realize there was some gaps in our industry, and built a new talk this winter to kind of talk about some changes about if we're not going to conferences and we're not attending events, are we actually advancing ag policy? And so I'm quite interested in, will this new world of digitization, like we're doing here right now, is that the way of the future? And so I see that. I see deeper conversations around code of practice in food retail. This collision of values from food processing, farming, and food retail to say, man, how come everyone can't win versus picking winners and losers in our food system? I think that's another. The rubber's hitting the road, and COVID's driving that. And then, frankly, just businesses trying to stay in operation when people are afraid to come to work because of the coronavirus, or there's an outbreak in a plant and we have to slow the line speed down. Like, how do we deliver food in this country? I think we've done really well at market access. We're exporting more than we have in the past. So despite COVID headwinds domestically, internationally, there's some good news stories happening too, especially on grains, oilseeds, and animal proteins. So that's the stuff that's on my watch list on it. You can see it's very eclectic. Kind of every moving piece of this industry, we kind of have a finger into what's happening. So.
Yeah. So you mentioned ag tech. What kinds of things are you seeing there?
Well, I'll put my farmer hat on for a minute, because you set me up pretty well here on Dana for a little rant that I love to do. And so I always think rants make for good entertainment. So here's my rant. We have worked super hard as an industry to draw attention to broadband internet and how we need broadband in order to be competitive as an industry. And I was sitting on the combine in the fall thinking about that. And frankly, last month, I think the Fed's announced $2 billion. We're going to bring broadband. The industry's celebrating this. I think the industry should be celebrating that we were heard and that the government is trying to help and we're trying to accelerate it. And there's lots of companies playing in the early side of delivering high-speed internet to people. But what I realized was what's missing for me while I was sitting in the combine is, so I have internet now, like outside of my, streaming my Twitter account or getting a Netflix feed, was I really using it to make decisions on my farm? And so if I think about the gap that I identified was, there's lots of companies that have software tools, and FCC, I think, has got one of the best in our Ag Expert platform. Counting thing, I use that. I think the farm management side that we use for record keeping is serving me well. But when I went beyond that to say, what other softwares am I using that require broadband? I actually wasn't using any. And I think the real challenge for the innovators at home, if you're listening to this podcast, is solve a real problem for me. And the farmer in me, if you're dryland farming in the West, which seems to be where the race to ag tech is happening, is I'm more drawn to agronomic problems at my farm. I chose my canola variety last week. My choices around that were mostly agronomic driven. They weren't around using the data that I had. So why didn't I use the data? I'm not sure. But I recognize the gap is you're going to show up with some software that if it's not solving a problem for me in my management decision, you need to go back and rework your software because the adoption rate won't be big enough. So my worry of broadband is, as an industry, we sat back and we said, gotta have it. Now that it's coming, do we have the software in the pipeline that's going to allow data transfer? We're still not digitizing all of our records in our industry. So if only half the records are digitized, I don't know if it's solving, broadband doesn't solve my problem. And so I think we could simplify this as an industry and say, let broadband happen. And along the way, let's look at our records and think about how do we share data. I've really noticed the supply chain need for data sharing. And there's a whole conversation around who owns the data. I've yet to wrestle that one down, but I know people are working on that. But it's what decision do we use with the data that's got me really tripped up lately is I actually don't know.
Yeah, good rant. It's hard because adoption of innovation is not linear and it kind of goes in fits and starts. I do think though, Marty, because of COVID, we've advanced in a lot of sectors, digital activity, 5 years in 1 year. I was reading a report by IBM, e-commerce has jumped. And our events, you're an event guy, you're a conference guy, you're a trade show guy prior to joining FCC. Well, this year with COVID, they've all been canceled. So one of our core activities through the winter has been events or trade shows or conferences, and they're slowly moving virtual. But what are your thoughts there? Like that, we're missing there's a huge gap, if you want to use the gap word, in our calendar. And how can farmers take advantage of, some of the opportunities as we hunker down for the winter?
Yeah, I'm almost feeling like a contrarian on this subject lately around what's the future of trade shows and events, because there seems to be this compelling push to say that we've all adopted the technology. We're doing this podcast here today and sort of using visual support tools, and it seems to be working. So if we deliver more broadband, most of us will engage in this more. But I think we're missing the human DNA, the fabric that you don't get through this digital experience, for example, on video conferencing. And this is why I think we'll go back to 80% of the way it used to be. And my rationale, I use this example. And so I attend a lot of industry roundtables and conference type things. There's a thing called the Beef Industry Roundtable. And we would meet a couple times a year. And it would be all players from the beef industry, 30 people sitting around a big boardroom, turning on their microphone to speak and turning it off and debating and advancing issues in the industry. So we held one in the spirit of COVID remotely. And we had 80 some people jump onto the call. And I would, at first blush, I'm like, wow, this is awesome. The participation rate is way up. And so my first response was to celebrate that. And then I thought, okay, well, what's happening in the meeting? We spent 6 hours sharing PowerPoint slides of what we're working on. The Packers shared, and the cattlemen shared, and the roundtable on sustainable beef shared. And so we had a really good sharing experience. I'll say pushing information. But we never had a debate or a dialogue to really advance the space. And then I was reflecting on that is, you know where that was happening, or where it does happen, is it happens at the buffet table and at the coffee breaks. So Joe and I break at our meeting, we zip over to the coffee and we're chatting. I said, Joe, I had this thought or an idea, and I socialize it with you. We come back to the round table, and I have now a new supporter for my idea named Joe. And I speak to it, and Joe says, yeah, I was talking to Marty, I'm in alignment, and we advance the industry. And I think we need that in agriculture to have the difficult conversations, because this exercise we're doing today, it's not as natural to have the breakout and the difficult conversation. The organic collisions are missing. And so for that, at that anchor alone, I think ag policy people would be well served to do that. Innovators and people that look for collaboration would benefit from the coffee road chat versus the formalized 1 hour Zoom call. So we got that piece. And the other one's community. Is I believe, and this is when I go to the farm, I see it all the time, is this winter, I'm actually looking for community as much as I am knowledge gathering. So when I can get knowledge gathering by reading on the internet, attending a Zoom call, but I don't get the community that I would get by attending an agribition or an outdoor farm show or the winter conference series. So I see antibodies in how business gets done that would mean some version of our life before COVID will come back. Technology will solve some, but not all.
Yeah, and I'm going to take a slightly different approach. I agree with you with the lack of events, the face-to-face, the depth and the deep conversations, policy conversations, they're missing. But I'm also seeing where I was on an event the other day speaking, and last year they had 120 people show up in person for their event. This year they had an event and they had 470 people sign up and consume the content digitally. Now, so maybe we're not a mile deep, but we're an inch, we're covering a lot of ground. And I think that's the opportunity. We've been thrust into this. And so I'm encouraging farmers and agribusiness people to take advantage of, meeting people. And maybe it's only an inch deep, not a mile deep. But I don't think, because I've been in airports or I've been traveling, I've had a more productive 6 or 8 months in my whole career because I can have these hour-long digital experiences. And I do think we are learning how to use Zoom and these platforms. The platforms are certainly getting better and deeper. And, you can attend 3 or 4 different things in the same week, whereas you would never have been able to do that before. So I think it's our mindset that's really the critical piece. It's like, all right, we've got lemons, so let's make lemonade, and let's try to be productive, and let's try to be innovative, and let's try to stretch ourselves and fill in some of our gaps in our business. So I hear you on that. I miss seeing you, at these events, but we are interacting here for a few minutes this morning and catching up. So it's a second place, but it still can be productive, I guess, is my point.
Yeah, I think, to build on your point, Joe, I think the piece you said is we've all become more scalable. And so you've been able to hit 4 different rooms in a week versus the one trip to London or the one trip to Toronto, pick a venue. So I like that. I'm with you. We need to find the opportunity in that. I'd encourage event organizers to relook at how we produce events as well. And, I see some good shifts saying we're going to do 2-hour punchy sessions. We'll meet 3 days in a row versus 6 hours all in. There's some good practices coming out of that. That will increase engagement. And then short punchy things like this talk, it's succinct and punchy, And then we move on back to our day. And I think we're consuming media different than we used to. You know, look at TikTok now. You're down to 15 seconds. Twitter blew our minds when we went to 145 characters. Like, oh, we had more to say, but it's still very succinct. And I consume my content that way. So I think that's the other opportunity inside of this, Joe, is pushing people like me that are content providers to be more succinct.
Marty, you talked about egg industry trends, and one of the things, you know, is on the commodity side. Do you have anything to share in terms of commodities, ethanol, you know, how that's gone a bit different?
You know, one of my favorite stories of reinvention through COVID has been ethanol, and you know, Ontario being kind of our hub of ethanol production in the country is just, you know, COVID hits, we stopped going to work as a society, we stopped flying airplanes, we just stopped consuming fossil fuels. So an ethanol blended gasoline all of a sudden wasn't being consumed, and their ethanol production dropped, or ethanol sales dropped 50% instantly. So by May, all those plants were operating at half capacity. By about September, I started to sit in on some calls with ethanol producers that, hey, the hand sanitizer market actually needs, like, they can't keep up. Well, we make alcohol, we can turn that into hand sanitizer. And they found a new market. And I think it's the best example of an industry who is disrupted, finding a new opportunity. And I think what it did was it created a diverse market for the ethanol providers, but also for our corn growers. All of a sudden, there's another place where there's a fit. I think those are cool. I think those are innovations that are, you know, that's what COVID did, was the disruption was so material that we had to change our business or we weren't going to make it.
No, that's a good example. Do you have any other examples of people that have had to make a pivot or a shift based on, you know, the new environment?
Yeah, I have some, and I don't know that I would call them as as positive, but I find them interesting. And so food and food retail. So probably the best example is our packing plants on the meat side that had to slow down line speeds. Also, we're not able to debone meat anymore, and pork and beef would be the best example. So we got consumers headed down the path of quick, easy to produce, or easy to cook roast, bone out. Well, all of a sudden, we now can't actually deliver that product anymore. And so we saw a shift at grocery in what people were buying and what they were being presented. The cool one for me, and I was just talking about this morning, was I didn't realize how many choices we had in a grocery store. And this number is something like 46,000 SKUs in a modern grocery store. So in 1976, it was like 9,000. There's hardly any. So the consumer was used to having an infinite amount of choice, in my personal opinion. So all of a sudden, canola was an example where we sold 3 different jug sizes of canola, like a 500 mil, a 1 liter, and a 5 liter. Now line speed slows down, supply chain disruption. They're like, we're going to offer 2 sizes. And so I'm watching food and food retail say, we're actually going to streamline. Restaurant menus have scrubbed themselves of so much choice and variety. Grocery is scrubbing variety. I think that's an interesting food trend to watch. Say, does that change how niche marketing happens in our industry? Or is it drive an efficiency into food retail that actually is warranted? So there's a few examples, like I said, bone-in meat, canola packaging sizes, and you'll see that throughout the whole grocery, and then the restaurant changes in what their offerings look like.
Marty, can you tell us a little bit about Canada's Egg Day? I know that's coming up soon, and you know, the industry participates, universities, colleges, and all kinds of producer involvement. Can you just explain a little bit about what happens on Egg Day and when it is?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about this one because it segues a bit to what we were talking about before about disruptions and interruptions and the value of the Canadian food system. And I think we can be proud in Canadian food that we've been resilient through COVID despite changes in packing plants and food processing. Ag Day is a day where we try to mobilize the entire industry. So Ag More Than Ever has been the catalyst behind this, but we want Canadians to stand proud. This year it happens in February 23rd, but it's every February, and stand up and say, you know, Canadian agriculture is something we're proud to be a part of, and we want consumers to know that their food is safe, it's reliable, and this is our neighbors producing food. And so Ag Day is really about public trust in food and trying to break our echo chamber as a farming community and a processing community to say, let's make the tent bigger and have all Canadians stand proud. It's anchored in a social media movement. And so we're trying to get people to put content in, even if it's what you're eating today and demonstrating some gratitude for Canadian food, or it's about farmers standing proud with something they've done that they want people to know. But it's really designed to break the echo chamber. We produce a conference every year as part of it. Naturally, as per our conversation earlier, it's a digital experience this year. I'm pretty proud to say Dominic Barton's joining us to have a chat with our CEO to talk about the opportunities that he sees in the global food system, and to build off the Barton report. It was, hey, as a country, are we living up to our potential? And agriculture will be part of the economic recovery of the country, and agri-food and the conversation of digitizing. We can step into this opportunity, and COVID created the platform. So I see Ag Day as a collision of opportunity for our industry. And we get great support from coast to coast. It'll be the #1 trending story on Twitter that day, and has been for 5 years.
Mm-hmm. And that's February 23rd?
It's February 23rd of this year, February 23rd of 2021.
Awesome. So hopefully everybody will participate. And what's the hashtag that they can use to
the hashtag? That's a great point, Diana. We use that as a way to really amplify the bubble. Is if everyone's putting the hashtag on their content, CDN Ag Day, that gels everything together and really allows the industry to get noticed in the thread. And the last few years, I've been particularly proud of consumer media grabbing our story. So the CBC Morning Show in Toronto, for example, picking up a story about agriculture and food. I mean, it's pretty cool. It's just this one day where we all stand united and say, despite the warts on the system when you're inside of farming and all the stuff we're trying to change, we've got a lot to be grateful for. This is our day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and good congrats on that. And I think it's important that we try to push through to the consumer, especially from the far end of the agri-food chain, I guess, supply chain, if you want to call it, because we're not that good at that. Have you seen the new McDonald's commercial with the beef ranching children? I actually tweeted it out the other night because I was so impressed. The young people did such a fabulous job of talking about their cattle in the industry, and proud to produce beef.
Do you know, I'll tell a little story on that, Joe. And yeah, we have a great working relationship with McDonald's, but as part of Ag Day, we bring in guest speakers all the time. And we've worked with McDonald's a couple times to have them come and talk about what they're seeing, where the trends are going. And I had the good fortune last year to meet the marketing manager for McDonald's Canada. And we talked about the origin of their Not Without Canadian Farmers. And the backstory on this is probably little understood, but that marketing manager that brought that idea came to Canada from Europe and had played this concept through France in terms of, hey, French farmers matter and support them, and brought this to Canada. And I think it's one of the most brilliant campaigns to engage the whole supply chain with a true sense of pride. It's really anchored in, we all got something to be proud of here. Their choice in supply chain, our choice in how we do sustainability. And what people underestimate in this industry is it just takes one person. It took that one person from McDonald's to say, I have an idea and let's do this. That's how agriculture grows.
Yeah, good job on that. That's a great story. You also are producing a podcast. I listened to a couple and really enjoy them. So how can people find, some of these interesting stories that you're producing regularly?
Yeah, so we launched in the fall a thing called FCC Knowledge Podcast, and you can find it just go into your podcast feed and just type in FCC Knowledge and it'll pull up. But what I've been enjoying about it is we're interviewing regular people that work in agriculture, and we cover lots of business stuff, how do you business planning, succession planning. But what I really enjoyed about it is these are regular people that you might know. They might be from, I don't know, Milton, Ontario. They could be from somewhere in Quebec or Watrous, Saskatchewan. And they're just telling their story, and they all have a common thread, is the passion that people have for the industry. And it's super hard not to be drawn into these, to listening to these people with their highs and lows in their journey, because every one of them has some sort of train wreck that happened in their farming career. you can't do this without having a mess. And so it's really good listening. So just check it out. Look for FCC Knowledge, and it's about agriculture and food.
That's excellent. Marty, can you, if people want to get a hold of you, how could they get a hold of you to discuss more or talk about different topics in the industry?
Yeah, certainly look me up through Marty Seymour on LinkedIn. That's a great way to message. And I'm pretty active on Twitter. If you follow my Twitter account, I have a laugh once a week at something in my life and or something related to our industry. And so I'm Marty Seymour 1. Give me a follow too, and reach out. I get my energy from hearing people's stories. And so don't hesitate to, and if you heard something I said today and it didn't sit with you, take me up on it. I welcome this. I think our industry is better by having meaningful conversations.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Marty. We really enjoyed the chat today, and we'll have to do this again sometime soon. Diana, great to see you again. And thanks to all our listeners for the Ready, Set, Grow podcast. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.